Hi, welcome to Movie Review with Daniel, and today we'll be looking at the most expensive movies you have never had heard of. Blockbuster movies often come with blockbuster budgets. Avengers Endgame, that most massive of modern movies, cost $356 million to make, but who cares when it's racked in $2.7 billion worldwide? Movies boasting internationally famous actors, superstars, director, ironclad franchise history, and cutting-edge computer graphics operate on a different sort of scale. Their budgets are gargantuan, but their profits are potentially record-shattering. As the saying goes, it takes money to make money. In the age of billion-dollar profit margins, more than a few movie studios are willing to spend. But movies, even the one that seems to be the safest bet, are still a gamble. Market research advertising star-studded cast, no matter how carefully assembled, never actually guarantees success. The worst-case scenario, in which enormous quantity of cash are pumped into a film that flops, is never impossible. Even for the most secure studio, the saving grace of this thinker is that they tend to fade quickly from the public's memory. But in the age of the internet, nothing stays forgotten forever. These are most of the expensive movies you've never heard of, dread from the depths of cinematic disgrace. 1. John Carter. John Carter is an expensive Disney flop that time forgot. Edgar Rice Burroughs' Martian series of pulp novels are among the most influential works of 20th century sci fiction, chronicling the story of John Carter, a Virginian who fought for the losing side in the Civil War, moved out west, and ended up on Mars. They are sweeping tales of adventure, romance, and intrigue. The Martian series imparts one's genre fiction can be overstated. It makes sense that Disney bet on their 2011/12 adaptation Don Carter being a big success. The film ended up grossing $248 million worldwide, a respectable number to be sure, but it's still gone down in history as one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. John Carter's exorbitant budget ended up being $250 million, with analysts pegging its combined production and marketing costs at $350 million. In the end, John Carter resulted in a $200 million write-down for Disney. All potential sequels were canned, and in 2014, Disney let the film rights to the Martian series revert back to the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate. Years later, John Carter is mostly remembered as a famous disaster when it is remembered all time. 2. Van Helsing. Van Helsing was a horror hit you might have never heard of. More than a century after its publication, we have yet to tire of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Enter 2004's Van Helsing, a film that pits Stoker Jewish vampire hunter against the entire Universal monster menagerie, crucifix, and solar-powered bombs. Van Helsing takes down Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, and Dracula. It's every horror fantasy trope of the early 2000s incarnate. Our female lead wears an exterior corset. Van Helsing sports a billowing leather coat straight out of The Matrix, and even action scene has a sleek video game quality in which gravity is reduced and the camera view widely between extremely close-up and massive wide shots. It cost $160 million and ended up making $300 million despite negative reviews. But for all its success, Van Helsing is remembered far less frequently than contemporaries like 1999's action romp The Mummy, an animated prequel, and a one-shot comic book were produced, but no sequel ever arrived. Then 2012 brought announcement of a reboot as part of the Universal Dark Universe, but like everything has to do with the particular project, 2017's The Mummy underperformance cast Van Helsing's future into doubt. It remains a strange success, watched by many but truly beloved of few. 3. Evan Almighty. Evan Almighty cost an ungodly amount of money. Bruce Almighty was an unlikely hit for one thing. The 2003 comedy takes on religion, a cultural third rail if ever there was one. Bruce, played by Jim Carrey, is a TV reporter given the power of God by the big man himself. He learns to appreciate his life for what it is, to see humanity with newly compassionate eyes and to be thankful for the gifts he's been given along the way. However, he humiliates his rivals, transforms prayers into emails in an infinity inbox, and goes full Moses, parting the Red Sea on a bowl of tomato soup. Despite this irreverent approach to faith and so-so reviews, however, it made $484 million worldwide on an $81 million budget, making it the fifth highest grossing film of 2003. A sequel was of course ensured, and as a result it got 2007's Evan Almighty, in which Steve Carell becomes a modern-day Noah. The budget ballooned, landing at a colossal $200 million, with marketing costs made it at that time the most expensive comedy movie ever made. Yet Evan Almighty only ended up grossing $174, which happened for one thing. An incredibly expensive ark was built according to the dimension of the biblical vessel. For another, many millions were spent making the film to religious audience. Only an enormous profit would have turned Evan Almighty into a success, and that necessary deluge of dollars failed to flood the theater. 4. 47 Ronin. 47 Ronin was a cinematic speckle. Released in 2013, 47 Ronin is based on a historical event so frequently fictionalized adaptation of it have their generic term, Chansugura, or the treasury of the loyal retainers. Story of this tribe tells the story of the 47 Ronin, who in 1702 spent a year planning their revenge upon the court official who murdered their master. It is the sort of story that is hard to screw up, yet 47 Ronin did, and it was swiftly wiped from the public's memory. The film's dear fate was made clear immediately after release. Reviews were scanty, and Japanese audiences, courted assiduously by the film's marketers, were unmoved by Hollywood's take on an already well-adapted tale. In the end, 47 Ronin made $151 million on a $175 million budget. This isn't much of a surprise to anyone who've seen the film. It inserts magic, monsters, and an entirely fictional protagonist played by action star Keanu Reeves into a story that simply doesn't need fantasy elements. A band of masterless samurai methodically plotting their revenge is already cinematic. No sorceress or magical forests required. 5. Alexander. Alexander is the historical epic that you have never heard of. Released in 2004, Alexander should be the sort of sword and scandal epic everyone has seen by the time they enter adulthood, whether on cable or in a history teacher's classroom. It is directed by Oliver Stone, stars Colin Farrell, Angelina Jolie, and Anthony Hopkins. It is about one of the most historical figures to ever walk the earth. Around $155 million was spent bringing Alexandra to life, and yet it only grossed $167 million worldwide. How actually did such a short thing ended up so forgotten? Well, for one thing, it is not a very good movie for all the talented. Monster, Alexander is a modeled, pretentious mess, richly deserving of its dear critical reception. The film is torn between being a dry recitation of facts and an action-driven epic, seemingly convinced that being as talky as possible equals serious-minded drama. It doesn't. Thus, Alexandra was forgotten, remembered most of for achieving an unpleasant feat, making the story of Alexander the Great, who created one of the largest empires of the ancient world before he died at 32, boring. 6. Around the World in 80 Days. Nobody remembers Around the World in 80 Days because it is so boring. Sometimes a movie brings turn of the century glamour, science, and politics together and still manages to end up forgotten. Released in 2004, Around the World in 80 Days attempted to give Jules Verne's 1873 novel the Hollywood treatment. International stars like Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger showed up. The budget grew to $110 million, and historical luminaries like Queen Victoria, Thomas Edison, and the 10 Tigers of Carton all made appearances. None of these grand gestures, however, managed to save Around the World in 80 Days from obscurity in which it rests. If it is remembered for anything, it is for being an infamous flop with a worldwide gross of only $72 million. It isn't a terrible movie really. Reviews weren't great, but that hasn't stopped Family Fear from doing well before. It is not as though the critics loved Minors Around the World in 80 Days. Greatest Sin is being boring. It takes on James Rennie's source material is shallow. Its action scenes are rote, even it is who of 1890 celebrities, including as in Progress Statue of Liberty, fails to dazzle. This is a film of no one, despite how many eras, styles, and genre it attempts to pack into its runtime, and so no one remembers it less than 2 decades after its debut. 7. How do you know? How do you know spent way too much money on its stars? Take four blockbuster lead, put them into a romantic comedy set in the elite echelons of sport and finance, and deputy just before Christmas when moviegoers are hungry for warm-hearted happy endings. How do you know banked on this formula, spending $120 million on its tale for a professional softball player at loose ends and the love triangle she finds herself enmeshed within? Yet the 2010 film brought into a worldwide gross of only $48 million. Reviews were no kinder. Critics savaged it as being navel-gazing, dull, and entirely too long. How do you know star power ended up being its Achilles heel? The salaries of Reese Witherspoon, Paul Rudd, Owen Wilson, and Jack Nicholson, combined with director James L. Brooks, cost $50 million on their own. Then there was the fact of Brooks' long and meticulous production and post-production processes. Costs went up as the months ticked by, all the more so when Brooks decided to reshoot the beginning and end of the film. This attention to details has resulted in some of his greatest work, including Terms of Endearment and Broadcast News. But how do you know didn't end up being a repeat performance? If it is remembered at all, it is as a legendary catastrophe, one point of distinction no director covets. 8. Jack the Giant Slayer. Jack the Giant Slayer is an expensive fairy tale that's faded away. Fairy tales have yet to lose their grip on the public imagination. Jack the Giant Slayer aimed to capitalize upon that in 2013 with a big-budget fantasy adventure all about the Jack who scaled the beanstalk and slew the giants found at the top. There's a princess to be saved, a highly coveted crown, and plenty of magical beings. Around $195 million were spent on bringing this vision to life, yet the worldwide gross ended up a mere $197 million. The fairy tale inspired film that led to Jack the Giant Slayer creation, like Snow White and the Huntsman and Alice in the Wonderland, have massively outlasted Jack in the public imagination, despite sequels for both. Reviewers identify many reasons for this failure. For one thing, Jack is a shallow reinterpretation, more interested in Gleazy effect than its own story. For another, it is only done between seeking a family audience and a growing up one. Jack is parental guardians 13, stranded somewhere between being a bloody Game of Thrones style affair and a twinkly-eyed tale for thought. Director Bryan Singer reportedly had to tone down the violence, a choice that kept Jack from being R-rated but lingers in the final product to his detriment. Today, Jack has disappeared behind the clouds, all traces of his beanstalk wiped from the cinematic landscape. 9. Poseidon. Poseidon was pricey and it sank at the box office. Paul Gallico's 1969 novel The Poseidon Adventure has been adapted into 3 films, the latest of which, 2006 Poseidon, is a remarkable remake of the earliest 1972's The Poseidon Adventure. It is easy to see why the property has proved to be such a rich vein of content. It tells the story of a band of passengers who must survive within a capsized ocean lane until rescue arrives. The simple act of turning a luxurious ship on its head makes for innovative cinema. Stairs suddenly must be scaled like cliff faces. Windows look out into murky ocean depths and lobbies must be crossed by makeshift zipline. The 1972 Poseidon Adventure was a major hit, winning a Special Achievement Academy Award for Visual Effects and the Academy Award for Best Original Song. A remake seemed like a no-brainer, especially in the post-Titanic world, and 2006 Poseidon bet $160 million on that surefire success, only to earn $1,181 million worldwide. Reviews were similarly lackluster, and though the film was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, its predecessor once won its loss to Pirates of the Caribbean's Dead Man's Chest. In the end, Poseidon's Up, leaving few ripples behind in the public memory. 10. Treasure Planet. The incredibly expensive Treasure Planet didn't earn back any goods. Legendary Disney director Ron Clements and John Musker pitched Treasure Planet way back in 1989 alongside The Little Mermaid. It would have made a decade for the science fiction vision of Robert Louis Stevenson's legendary Treasure Island to be made, but it would have taken only a few months to cement it as one of Disney's most infamous failures. To this day, 2002's Treasure Planet is the most expensive traditionally animated film ever made. The $140 million spent making it certainly shows its vision of far-flung adventure is dazzling, earning solid reviews and a nomination for the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, yet it only brought in $110 million worldwide. Today, it is hard not to see the Treasure Planet as a symbol of the end of the Disney Renaissance, that period in which the studio produced mega hits like The Lion King and Aladdin. It is unfair, really. Treasure Planet is worth anyone's time, both as a fascinating sci-fi outlier among Disney's fantasy fare as one of the best Disney movies most people haven't seen, but the box office is cruel, and so Treasure Planet was tossed into the sea of animated oddities. Thanks for watching today's review. Please feel free to hit the like and subscribe button and leave your comments in the comment box below.